I was standing in my own kitchen, holding a receipt for a computer I bought with my own money, while my husband screamed at me like I had robbed a bank. He used the phrase financial infidelity. He said it slowly, deliberately, like he had been rehearsing it. And something about the way he said it, the practiced outrage, the perfect vocabulary, made a small, cold thought form in the back of my mind. People who use very specific language to accuse you of something often learned that language somewhere personal. I had no idea that within 72 hours I would be sitting at my kitchen table with printed bank statements, a spreadsheet I built myself, and the kind of evidence that doesn't just end a marriage, it detonates one. Let me take you back to the beginning, because the beginning matters. My name is irrelevant. What matters is that I had been married for 6 years to a man I will call Derek. Derek was charming, professionally successful, and, as I would eventually learn, a world-class liar with an astonishing talent for misdirection. We had a joint account for household expenses and shared savings, and we each kept personal accounts for individual spending. That was a boundary we agreed on before we even got engaged. My money, his money, our money. Or so I thought. I work from home as a freelance graphic designer. My personal account is funded entirely by my client invoices. In March of last year, after 3 years of squinting at a secondhand monitor that flickered every time I opened a large file, I decided to upgrade my home office setup. I bought a new PC tower, a color-accurate monitor, and a proper ergonomic chair. Total cost, $1,240. Paid entirely from my personal account. I did not touch our joint savings. I did not touch our household account. I used my money, the money I earned, the money that had always been designated as mine. Derek found the receipt on the counter 2 days later. What followed was not a conversation. It was an ambush. He came into the kitchen where I was making coffee, slapped the receipt down on the counter, and started talking about responsibility and partnership and how we were supposed to be saving for a house. I reminded him calmly that we already owned a house, the one we were standing in, which I had inherited from my grandmother. He pivoted without missing a beat. He said we needed to be saving for the future, for retirement, for emergencies. He said I was being selfish. He said, and I want you to really hear this, that buying something for myself without consulting him first was a form of financial infidelity. I asked him to define that term. He said it meant hiding purchases and deceiving your partner about money. I pointed out that I had not hidden anything. The receipt was literally on our kitchen counter. He said the spirit of the action was deceptive. I said the spirit of the action was me buying a work tool with my work money. He walked out of the room. I stood there for a long moment. And then I opened my laptop. I want to be honest about what drove me to look. It was not a sudden dramatic instinct. It was something quieter and more uncomfortable than that. It was the recognition that Derek had been unusually tense for about 4 months. That he had started keeping his phone face down on every surface. That he had mentioned a coworker named Jolene twice in passing, both times in a tone that was just slightly too casual, the way people sound when they are actively trying to sound unbothered. And it was the phrase financial infidelity itself, specific, loaded, and delivered with the fluency of someone who had been thinking about financial deception a great deal lately. I logged into our joint savings account. I had not looked at it in about 6 weeks. I handled the household checking. Derek had taken over monitoring the savings account about 8 months prior, saying he wanted to be more involved in our financial planning. I had thought that was mature and considerate. I had been wrong about what it actually was. The balance was $41,000 lower than it should have been. I did not scream. I pulled up the transaction history and I started reading. And what I found was not one large, suspicious transfer that might have had an innocent explanation. What I found was a trail, methodical, patient, and spanning 7 months. Transfers ranging from $800 to $4,000, always to the same external account, always on Fridays, always described in the memo field with labels like home project deposit, or contractor payment, or investment transfer. 31 separate transactions. A total of $43,200 moved out of our joint savings and into an account I did not recognize. I wrote down the receiving account number. Then I did something Derek never anticipated. I called our bank. I explained that I was a joint account holder and that I was seeing a series of transfers I did not authorize or recognize. The representative confirmed that the transfers had been initiated by the other joint account holder, Derek, and that the destination account was a personal checking account. She could not tell me whose account it was, but she confirmed the account number matched what I was seeing on my screen. She also informed me, gently, that as a joint account holder, I had every right to flag the transactions and request a formal review. I told her I would be in touch and hung up. Then I opened a new spreadsheet, and I started building a timeline. Every memo label. I cross-referenced the dates against my own memory. Our anniversary dinner in October, when Derek had seemed distracted and checked his phone 4 times during dessert. The weekend in November when he said he was at a work conference and came home with a tan but no conference lanyard, no branded tote bag, none of the usual debris of a corporate event. The Christmas party I had skipped because of a deadline, where Derek had stayed until 2 a.m. and come home smelling like a perfume I did not own. The spreadsheet was becoming something more than a financial document. It was becoming a portrait. I still did not have a name attached to the account, but I had Jolene. I had the two casual mentions. I had the face-down phone. And I had a gut feeling that had been quietly trying to get my attention for months, while I was busy working and trusting and assuming the best. I reached out to a friend of mine, I will call her Priya, who worked in HR at a mid-sized firm and had, over the years, become something of an informal expert in untangling workplace drama. I did not tell her everything. I told her I had reason to believe my husband was sending money to a coworker, and I needed to find out if that coworker was who I thought she was. Priya asked me one question. Did I know the woman's last name? But I knew Derek's company, I knew his department, and I knew the name Jolene. Priya came back to me in less than 48 hours. She had found a LinkedIn profile. Same company as Derek, same department. And in her most recent profile photo, updated 6 weeks ago, Jolene was visibly, unmistakably pregnant. I sat with that information for a full day before I did anything else. I needed to be certain. Certainty, in a situation like this, is not just emotional, it is strategic. I was about to make decisions that would affect the house I had inherited from my grandmother, the savings I had contributed to for 6 years, and the entire architecture of my life. I could not afford to act on assumption. I needed receipts. I contacted a family attorney. I will not use her name, but I will tell you she was exactly the kind of person you want in your corner when your world is collapsing, calm, precise, and entirely unmoved by drama. I brought her my spreadsheet, the bank transaction history I had printed, and everything I knew about Jolene. She told me 3 things that changed how I approached everything that followed. First, because the house I lived in had been inherited directly by me before the marriage and had never been refinanced jointly or used as collateral for any joint debt, it was almost certainly protected as separate property. She would need to review the deed and any relevant documents, but her initial read was strong. Second, the $43,000 Derek had transferred out of our joint savings was potentially recoverable as dissipated marital assets, meaning a court could factor that money back into the division of property, even if it was already gone. Third, I should not confront Derek, contact Jolene, or change anything about my behavior until she gave me the go-ahead. I needed to let the evidence accumulate undisturbed. I went home that evening and made dinner. Derek came home, kissed me on the cheek, asked about my day. I told him it was fine. I asked about his. He said it was busy. We ate pasta, and watched television, and I smiled at appropriate moments, and I thought about $43,200 and a pregnant woman named Jolene. Over the next 2 weeks, I gathered everything my attorney asked for. The deed to the house, in my name alone, exactly as she had predicted. My grandmother's will, leaving the property to me specifically. Records showing I had paid all property taxes and maintenance costs independently since inheriting it. My personal account statements showing the clean separation between my freelance income and our joint finances. And one more thing, something I found entirely by accident while looking for an old tax document in Derek's home office filing cabinet. A lease agreement. A one-bedroom apartment across town. Signed by Derek and co-signed by Jolene. Start date, 4 months ago. Monthly rent, $1,800. I photographed every page with my phone, put the document back exactly as I found it, and texted my attorney from the driveway. She called me back within the hour. She said, "We're ready. Here's what we did, and I want you to understand that every step of this was deliberate and documented." My attorney filed for divorce on a Thursday morning. Derek was served at his office at 11 a.m. I know this because my attorney confirmed it, and because Derek called me 47 minutes later, his voice doing something I had never heard it do before. A kind of frantic, scrambling quality, like a man who has just watched the floor open beneath him. He said it was a mistake. He said we needed to talk. He said whatever I thought I knew, I had it wrong. I told him that I had the bank statements, the lease agreement, and Jolene's LinkedIn profile, and that my attorney would be handling all further communication. But here is the part that I have thought about many times since, the part that I am still not entirely sure was the right thing to do, though I have never once regretted it. Before Derek could call Jolene and begin constructing a mutual defense, I contacted her myself. I want to be precise about why. It was not cruelty. It was not revenge in the petty sense. It was the recognition that Jolene was, in at least one important way, also a victim. Not of me, but of the same liar I had been living with. She was pregnant. She was co-signing a lease with a man who had a wife she may or may not have known about. She deserved to make her decisions with accurate information. I sent her a message through LinkedIn. I kept it short. I told her who I was. I told her I had filed for divorce that morning. I attached 3 things: a photo of our marriage certificate, a screenshot of the bank transfer history showing $43,000 moved to the account I now believed was hers, and a photo of the lease agreement with both their signatures. I told her I held no anger toward her personally, and that I hoped she would make whatever decisions were right for her and her child with full information. Then I closed the app. She read the message within 20 minutes. I know because the read receipt appeared. I never heard from her directly, but Derek's attorney contacted my attorney the following week, and the tone had shifted considerably. Derek was no longer talking about reconciliation. He was talking about settlement. The divorce process took 4 months. I will not pretend it was painless, because it was not. There were days when I sat in my car in the driveway of the house, my grandmother left me and cried until I couldn't breathe. There were nights when I replayed every moment of the past year and cataloged every sign I had missed or explained away. Grief does not care how justified your anger is. It shows up anyway. But the evidence held, every piece of it. The inherited house was confirmed as my separate property. Derek had no claim to it. The $43,000 in transferred savings was treated by the court as dissipated marital assets, meaning the division of our remaining joint property was adjusted to account for what he had taken. His attorney pushed back. My spreadsheet, my bank records, and the lease agreement pushed back harder. Derek walked away from the marriage with his car, his personal debts, and a support obligation that reflected the reality of what he had done. Jolene had filed her own legal claims against him by that point. I learned this secondhand through Priya, and I will admit I felt something complicated when I heard it. Not satisfaction exactly. more like the recognition that actions have weight, and weight eventually lands somewhere. I kept the house. I kept my business. I kept the savings that remained after the court's adjustment. And I kept something harder to quantify but more valuable than any of it, the knowledge that when the moment came, I did not panic. I moved carefully, and I moved correctly. Derek had called my $1,200 computer purchase financial infidelity. He had used that phrase, that very specific, very loaded phrase, while actively funneling $43,000 of our shared savings to the woman carrying his child. The audacity of that is something I will probably never fully absorb. But I have stopped trying to understand how someone becomes capable of that kind of projection. Some questions do not have answers worth finding. What I know is this. The receipt he slapped on my kitchen counter was the first piece of evidence in a case I did not yet know I was building. His outrage was the first clue. His language was the second. The bank statements were the third. The lease agreement was the fourth. And Jolene's red receipt, that small, quiet confirmation that she now knew the truth, was the last. I think about my grandmother sometimes, and the house she left me. She was a practical woman who believed in keeping your own records, your own accounts, and your own counsel until you were certain. She used to say that the truth does not need your help to arrive. It just needs you to get out of its way. I got out of its way, and it arrived right on schedule. If you are watching this and something in your life feels slightly wrong, a phrase that is too specific, a tone that is too casual, an account you have not looked at in a while, I am not telling you to assume the worst. I am telling you to look. Pull the statements. Build the spreadsheet. Talk to an attorney before you talk to anyone else. Because the truth is almost always already there, documented in some ledger somewhere, waiting for someone to simply read it. And if you find what I found, if the numbers tell a story you were not prepared to hear, do not let the shock make you sloppy. The most powerful thing you can do in that moment is not to scream, not to confront, not to send the furious text you absolutely deserve to send. The most powerful thing you can do is open a new spreadsheet, start a new column, and keep going. Because receipts do not lie. And the people who accuse you most loudly of the thing they are doing, they are always, always leaving a paper trail.